Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest thing you've ever witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I don't live in the most awesome neighborhood. It's not super low income or slummy normally, but it is right next to the rail yard, so property values are low-ish. It's not high crime, but we have had a couple of SWAT busts within a few blocks of here in the last decade. The scary one for me was last summer. My dog starts barking like a maniac, so I poke my head out front. She usually settles if I take her onto the porch for a sec to check the perimeter. And I saw several cop cars with lights going, blocking the street just 2 houses down, and worse, an officer aiming a black bullpup across the hood of his cruiser at that house. I was like, nope. Went back inside and had my family down in the basement hanging out for an extra hour past bedtime until the situation wrapped up. Turned out there was a guy with some mental challenges living in that house with his mom and some other family, and he's a really big guy. So we had some kind of episode, all resolved without a shot fired or anything major going down, but that's the closest I've been to real violence since my kids were born. Walking through South Philly 2 years ago, I walked under a highway overpass near the waterfront on my way to a cafe. Shortly after crossing the street, I felt a massive shockwave on my back with heat and sound like a cannon. As I turned, I saw a massive cloud of fire under the overpass where I had just been seconds earlier. I was entranced by the way the fire in the air began to dissipate slowly into smoke, with no visible damage having been done to anything. There were no people in the affected area and nothing flammable to catch. I called emergency services to report it. As I walked down the street, I spoke with some other folks who came out to figure out what the hell happened. When I got to my destination several blocks away, a cafe that I went to every day for my lunch break, I was asked if I knew what the sound was. And finally, when I walked back to work, a school, my coworkers asked me what was going on, since I was the only staff member not at the school when they heard an explosion and locked everyone down inside the building. Emergency services responded to multiple calls, but as there was no lasting damage, there wasn't anything for them to do. The best explanation I've heard was that there was an accident on I-95 spilling fuel through the rain vents to underneath the overpass. Some spark could have ignited it, creating the massive fireball I witnessed. Luckily, no harm was done to me or anyone else, but if I'd been a few seconds late in leaving for my lunch, I have no idea how differently things could have gone. This freak explosion that had everyone puzzled was heard throughout the city, and couldn't be credibly traced back to a cause that could have been the thing that killed me, and it wouldn't have been any less mysterious for it. All those folk who came out as the flames turned to smoke would be the ones to have found me, with even less of an idea of what happened than I would have. I still think of what I saw, a cloud of fire transforming to swirling tongues of flame that dissipated into smoke before disappearing into the air. I witnessed a car accident that looked like a scene out of a movie. I was driving on the highway coming home from work one day. As I went under an overpass, a car launched itself off at a very high rate of speed. It started flipping down the highway, and it landed upside down. I and a truck driver were the first on the scene. He called 911 as I was running up to the car. It was really confusing what I was looking at. It just looked like a flattened tin can. Then I saw an arm hanging out, but not attached to a body. I kept looking for the body inside the car, and I didn't realize the person had been crushed under it. Half of a head and brain matter were on the ground about 10 feet from where I was standing. A woman had run over to the accident scene. I tried to tell her it wasn't good, and she needed to turn away. She didn't listen, and she ran past me. That woman's screams still haunt me today. The video my significant other has of me during my OD, from getting ragdolled out of the backseat by 4 or 5 nurses, my partner was running with them, and all you could really hear from the video was them talking about a 24-year-old overdose unresponsive, and my partner sobbing. I saw the part of the video where they ripped my hoodie off to put a shock pad on my chest and back while they administered Narcan in one arm and attempted to find a vein in my other arm for fluids. All the while, they were rhythmically squeezing air into my bare and still chest with the bag valve mask. There were easily 8 nurses in that room. I've never seen myself look so pale and sunken. The camera was vibrating because my SO was horrified. I'm clean now, and I asked her to do this if it ever happened, so that way I can remember why I stopped. About 16 years ago, I was washing dishes and the kitchen window was facing the front yard. Suddenly I see a whole effing SWAT team coming toward my yard. I was in disbelief when suddenly they knocked on my door. Upon opening it, one of them said to me, "Ma'am, there's a murder suspect in your backyard. We need to come in." I immediately led them toward the backyard. After that, it was all a blur. They were in the backyard for what seemed like a couple of minutes, then rushed back out. Turns out, some dude had killed someone around the corner from my house. He fled and was hiding in my neighbor's backyard for hours until he was noticed, and the police called. The dude then jumped the fence into my backyard and was hiding there for God knows how long, and when he realized SWAT was close, he jumped to the back neighbor's yard. From there, he fled outside and was ultimately gunned down in the middle of the street. Certainly don't miss living in that area. 30 minutes of tonic-clonic status, epilepticus. My mum was seizing uncontrollably, whole body. Then half her body would go limp whilst the other kept going, swapping sides. Restarting the whole body over, lips turning blue, frothing at the mouth. My dad and I had to take turns being in the room with her waiting for the ambulance crew to arrive. I said goodbye 3 times with lots of I love yous. The first responder came in about 15 minutes and attempted to get a line in to supply anti-seizure meds, but had a real hard time. Eventually, they got a dose in, but it didn't work. The full ambulance crew arrived and managed to get Mum to stop seizing physically. As I understand it, the drugs don't necessarily stop the brain activity, but when they arrived after 30 minutes, they had said to each other, "No way she's still going." But yeah, it took them another 5 to get her under control. This was the 3rd time I'd witnessed one of her seizures last for longer than 5 minutes. The 2 previous ones were about 30 minutes, also had similar stories. I wasn't there to witness the one that practically killed her. The arriving ambulance don't have the required medication to stop the seizure there and then. We needed to call the fire brigade to help get her down the stairs and into the ambulance to be driven 20-minute drive to A&E. Dad reckons she must have been going for about 2 hours. Woke up almost paralyzed from apoxic brain injury, further complicated by her long-standing illness. Happy New Year, by the way, everyone. What are some of the scary things you witnessed? Curious. When I was about 15 or so, my parents worked graveyard and I was home alone 5 nights a week. One night, before they went to work, my adult cousin and his friend came over to visit. Everyone left when it was time for my parents to go to work. A couple of hours later, my cousin's friend came back and was knocking on my door saying he left his beer on the table. I didn't think much of it. So I opened the door and walked to my bedroom. Locked the door. I didn't know what to do, so I called my mom and told him he was there. She went nuts. Meanwhile, he's jiggling the doorknob, telling me to open up. My mom said, "Give him the phone." He was so surprised when I quickly opened the door and shoved the phone in his face and said, "My mom wants to talk to you." I closed the door quickly and locked it, but not before I noticed that he was aroused. Scariest moment of my life. I don't know what she said to him, but he left immediately, and once I heard the front door close, I ran out and locked it. I think my mom told him she was on her way home and she called the police. The police came, and I told them what happened. They said if he comes back, call again, and in the meantime, they'll look for him. Well, he must have been watching the apartment and saw the cops leave, because just a little while later, he came back and was banging on my front door, yelling at me to let him in. I called 911, and they ended up finding him and arresting him. I heard from my cousin that his wife let him and took the kids after what he did to me. Obviously, my cousin told him he'd kill him if he ever saw him again. A few years later, he came into a bank I was working in, and I about died of a heart attack. I ran to the break room before he could see me. Looking back as a 42-year-old woman, I realize now that the whole situation could have gone so badly in so many ways. I'm extremely lucky. It was almost more terrifying that I could only hear it and not see it. My mom and stepdad were having a big fight, yelling in their room with the door shut. I was outside in the hallway, and it got so eerily silent, and all I could hear was the clicking and clacking noises of him messing with his hunting rifle. I was frozen in fear. I didn't know what he was doing with it. If my mom's life was in danger, if all of me and my siblings' lives were in danger. He'd been violent before, but nothing like this. I don't know how long it lasted. It felt like forever. There were some quiet speaking that I couldn't understand, and just the same clicking and clacking noises of him doing whatever with this rifle. After a long while, my mother came out by herself. It was the first and last time I ever confronted her about his behavior. I told her I heard. I asked her what was going on, and I told her that wasn't okay. She just kept assuring me that because he was in the military, taking apart and putting his gun back together was just something soothing he did to calm himself, and that it wasn't a problem. Seeing how utterly unfazed and confident she was made me sick. It told me two things. One, he has done this before, and two, my mother wasn't ever going to be capable of protecting me or my little siblings. They just celebrated their 15th wedding anniversary. When I was 25, I had a spontaneous pneumothorax, or random hole in my lung. I was eating out of town and felt a sudden pain on the right side of my chest. Like a genius, I ignored it and made the hour drive home. My father was a physician, so I called him after taking some Tylenol, and he said to go to the emergency room. I did, and sat there for a few hours because they didn't think anything was wrong with me. My O2 was at 98%, and I wasn't showing any other signs of fatigue. Dad calls to check up and says to get a chest x-ray. Local doc rolls his eyes like, oh great, the kid's father thinks he knows more than me. One x-ray, and 2 hours later, the doctor and another doctor and a bunch of nurses all zoom into the little bed area. He tells all the student nurses to pay attention because this is very rare. I have no idea what's happening and start to freak out as they immediately cut me open and insert a chest tube. Then I was given morphine and shipped upstairs. I called Dad, and he talked to the local doc and was furious. My father was a surgeon for 40 years, and this new guy has never seen one of these before. Dad found a proper specialist and got me transferred. 15 years later, I'm thankful to be alive and healthy. Had I not gone to the ER and just went to bed that night, I'd be dead. Thanks, Dad. I've been active in sports and the outdoors all my life, I never thought something like this could happen to me. Apparently, though it's rare, it usually occurs in tall, skinny young men. Yay for us. There's nothing to prevent it, but you might get a cool photo of the inside of your lung.